Hello, I am Janice McCoy, Exhibition Committee Chair at Buckham Gallery. Today I am joined by Michele Leclaire, whose work we are currently showing at Buckham. Michele's paintings will be on view in the gallery with Dear Memory through October 3rd. We are also hosting an online viewing room on our website. First, I would like to say thank you to the individuals and organizations who support Buckham Gallery, including the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, and the National Endowment for the Arts, the Greater Flint Art Council Share Art Janice Grant Program, made possible by the Janice County Arts Education and Cultural Enrichment Millage Funds, your tax dollars at work. Like I said, we're here with Michele. Michele Leclaire is a fine artist who holds degrees in visual arts from the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. Greatly influenced by the Academy's atelier training, Leclaire left undergrad in love with materials, process, and the human form. She became fascinated with old family photographs and the distortion of memory. Leclaire continues to explore the effects of time on memory in her search to connect with those who have passed from this life. Looking to distill the essence of a memory captured by the camera or combine moments that span decades, Leclaire creates new memories to continue the conversation with the past. Michele currently lives and works in Flint, Michigan. Welcome, Michele.
Hi, thank you so much.
So as I was saying, Dear Memory is 3 concurrent exhibitions, each exploring nostalgia and memory through place or experience on personal and universal levels. Your body of work is subtitled Sea of Memory. Can you explain how memory and passage of time play a role in your work?
For me, memory isn't necessarily this river that flows in one direction. There's this incredible quote from a book that I read, and mind you, I read this decades after I had been working on these paintings, but it just like really clicked. And it's from a Terry Pratchett book, Hatful of Sky. And it said the river of memory wasn't a river, it was a sea. The Keldas yet to be born would remember one day, on nights yet to come, they'd lie by their cauldron and become, for a few moments, part of the eternal sea. By listening to unborn Keldas remembering their past, you remember your future. So I enjoy this idea because I'm working with photographs that are little snapshots of kind of like pieces of evidence or artifacts of people and time. And I'm combining things that happened a long time ago while remembering things in the present or the people now, and this idea that it's all just kind of overlapping and flowing together. And so you know, memory and the passage of time is kind of fluid in the works, and then it becomes part of the working process. You know, I'm layering paint, and then I'm sanding it down and glazing layers and working back into that, and then I sand again, and so there becomes a passage of time and a development in the image as it shifts and grows, that it also becomes part of the work and this idea of memory and time.
That's a really beautiful way to look at the world, honestly, too, you know, in addition to the art aspect of it. That's very nice. So I know in your artist statement you mentioned, and you just mentioned now, the role that family photographs play in your work. What draws you to a particular photograph?
Sure. So I have photographs in frames in my studio. I have kind of end up collecting things as family members have downsized from their homes to move into, as they get older and then move into small. I have become this sort of receptacle of collecting these things because, you know, you don't want it to get thrown out. And yeah. Even my mom did that, you know, as her parents and my dad's parents downsized, she would kind of collect. And so now I have some of these, and it's not just in photographs. It ends up being like furniture and dishes and odd pottery and things like that. But so I have shoe boxes and other boxes just full of photographs, and I flip through them, and sometimes there's something that maybe that's going on and that's making me think of someone. And so one of my relatives was starting to deal with dementia, and so they're on my mind and I'm thinking about them. So then of course the images, the photographs with them in them, I start to kind of pull out and go through, and I'm kind of like flipping through, and then I'm looking at things that are mostly the photographs I'm interested in are from the late 1940s to the late 1980s. You know, that's just kind of where I am interested in. It's still, everything's in film. They're not too focused, usually. Sometimes it's candid or, you know, posed, but not by a professional, you know, and these, you know, things that I like, and the candid moments where they are, I don't know, you see sort of the interactions and relationships through them. I guess it would be, would make sense to mention that this whole body of work sort of started in 2005. You know, I was in grad school. I was doing these large works on paper drawings. I was all about figurative nudes. I worked from like photographs for myself. You know, I was influenced by Janice and you know, teachers I had then, and you know, it was gestural and lots of lines and stuff. And my dad died, and it was unexpected. He was far away. It was his first heart attack, and it was just one of those like, what is this, you know? And then you start, you know, going through the whole grieving process and everything. And then as an artist, you know, I'm looking at these photographs and I'm kind of like looking for him. I'm looking for, you know, the essence of his thing, and they fall short, you know. It's like, it's flat, but sometimes it catches something. There'll be some spark, whether it seems like a pose or an expression or something. And I was just, you know, those are kinds of things that would draw me in. And so that's how I started working from these family photographs.
You mentioned, this is not in one of our questions, but you mentioned that the family photographs kind of range in age from like 1940s to 1980s. So do you know all the people that are in the photographs? Because I know like you can have like older photographs where maybe you didn't know that person.
Well, I haven't always met them. I always know of the relation, and I've heard stories, you know, about this great grandparent or something. Or sometimes I will have met them when I was like 2, and you know, they were very elderly at the time. But I will work from photographs and when they are younger sometimes, and pair them with another time, someone else who wouldn't have met them.
No, that's
overlapping.
That's
things.
interesting. That's I don't feel like as many people are quite as connected with their family history then as you are in this way, because you've had to immerse yourself so much in it. And
my mom loves to tell stories, and I understand she got that from her father, and so there was always stories. And so I feel as though it's kind of interesting. Not all my memories are my own. I feel like they're influenced. And that's kind of the funny thing, like that quote, why sometimes it speaks to me, this idea of remembering times that aren't your own, you know, that because someone once asked me, what's your earliest memory? And I was telling about this, you know, being 2 years old, you know, getting stitches on my chin, you know, being like strapped on a bed in the light and stuff. And honestly, I don't know that I remember that, but I had heard stories. Like my mom would always tell stories about things that had happened to us, because that would be interesting to us, you know. And I don't remember my birth, obviously, but every Mother's Day, we would hear the story of our birth, you know. And And they end up, and even in the telling, it overlaps with the stories of my sisters, and and they kind of having that narrative. I'm not a great storyteller, but I can make images, and this is the way I can tell the stories. They make up my own. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
visually, sometimes that narrative is a lot more powerful than it would be with words. So one thing that has always struck me about at least the work of yours that I know of within the past few years is the scale. They're quite small, and they always force me to come in closer to kind of take a look and engage with them a little bit more closely than something that's bigger. How do you think the scale of your paintings and drawings relates to some of the concepts that you've been talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first started the family paintings, so back in like 2005, 2006, the scale was important because it was all about the photograph. It needed to be the size of the photograph. It needed to feel like that. I read this book at that time called The Camera Lucida, and it's by Roland Barthes. And the first half of the book is a little dry. It really is about photography and composition and stuff. But he talked about, and it's been a really long time since I've read it, but it was something like the punctum, the spark that draws you in. Mm-hmm. And then the second half of it, the book, is actually about what drew him to photography, because he's a writer about art and literature and everything. That it was after the death of his mother, and look, this is why this book was recommended to me, of course. I was looking at these photos because I was already doing these paintings. I was looking at these, trying to find the essence of his mother in these photographs that he had. And we talked about the photograph as evidence, as we look for the proof of their life and of their existence. They became these like small, intimate objects. The size of the photograph. Even my choice of Mylar is this polyester paper. It's plasticky. It's like film. So I felt like I was still kind of making new evidence of memories and of events. My work is creeping up a little bit. I'm just trying to get bigger.
Well, if you make small paintings, that just means you can make a whole bunch of small paintings.
It does. It does.
So I did actually want to ask you about the Mylar. So do you affix that to the board, or how exactly does that work?
I do now. That is, presentation has been one of my biggest challenges. Mm-hmm. With, Mylar, though it's polyester, it's a work on paper. Mm-hmm. And when I first did these, they were mounted on plexiglass, but not permanently. It was actually taped and mounted on plexiglass. Oh. And then I was trying to that's not a real great way to protect them. So I started matting and framing them with large white mats around them. And that's great for protecting them, but then they become something different. You're removed by the glazing, the plexi in front of them. And they become bigger. Although, it does ensure space around your piece, but I don't know. I didn't like that presentation as much. So now they are mounted directly on panel. And before I'm finished with them, so that I can keep working into it. 'Cause there's usually accidents, unexpected things that happen when you mount them. Yeah. The Mylar, the other thing that's really great about Mylar is that it's translucent. So I actually paint on both sides of it. I paint on the front and the backs of the Mylar. And especially if I'm not sure how I'm going to approach a certain photograph, you know, I kind of work in the drawing and then I'm like, well, which way is it going to go? I'll flip it over to the back and I'll start painting on the back. I'll block in the clothes and maybe the background and maybe a little shading or whatever for the faces. And then after that dries, I'll flip it back over and then I'll paint to the front, and then it gives me something to react to.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And does that help give it kind of a different kind of sense of depth too sometimes?
It does. And in several of them, it's actually multiple layers of Mylar.
Mhm.
So then that gives a couple different,
Okay.
yeah. With me hiding, that is painted on 2 pieces of Mylar that are then mounted together.
Okay.
Yeah, the background, the not the graphite flowers, but the colored flower, the painted in color, that's actually on a separate piece of Mylar behind the top one. Because the pattern.
Yeah, no, the layering aspect of it is very interesting, and just gives you more options for how to arrange things and do things.
Yeah.
So this kind of segues nice since we have the images up again. When I look at some of the faces of your subjects, I see that some of them are kind of intentionally generalized or a little bit more, you know, like less detailed, and then others maybe are more detailed, and then some are softer. So I was wondering if you could elaborate more on your representation of the figure and kind of how you choose what, you know, to fill in a little bit more and what to kind of.
Yeah. So especially in the center one, Thick as Thieves, you know, I'm working on it, and what drew me to this image, you know, was that it was a candid moment. Anytime you try to take a pose picture of a group of people, and especially kids, you know, they're just going to do what they're going to do, and that gets, so that's what drew me in. But then when I start, you know, and I'm trying to show that, but then the painting takes over, you know, it becomes, it's not specifically about whatever memory of mine anymore. It becomes a painting, you know. So then I'm doing the glazes, and I'm working, and sometimes it just makes sense to not, you know, after you put the glaze, you kind of start wiping it away, and you're like, oh, well, no, that works. I'm not going to wipe it away from everywhere, and then so the one becomes the shadow, and then you work with it compositionally. So these aren't portraits of people, and they're not, you know, renderings of anyone specific at this time. It becomes an object of art. I mean, an artwork, and it's can be any group of kids that way also, which helps send it out into the world so that other people can relate and be pulled in and have their own experience with it.
For sure, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And like, just for instance, that piece that you were referring to, Thick as Thieves, like that figure on the right, like that's a beautiful shadow. It's so warm, and it feels rich, and yeah, it's a really interesting effect to have some of them a little bit more in focus and others not. I think it creates a lot of visual interest.
Yeah, and sometimes when I'm working on it, especially with that one, I in groups of kids, I start wondering, like, where are these kids now? Like, I don't know who that kid is. That's not one of the ones in the picture I know. So who knows where it has happened and where their lives have taken them. And so sometimes those are thoughts I'm having. It's not why, you know, I left the burnt sienna or whatever over him, you know, but that happens in there. And then like next to that painting, and perfectly, why one is more clear than the other is because it's the same girl. I just put her in twice because I like this idea of, you know, the different parts of the self, you know, and it became the painting, and so it didn't need to both be as clear.
Sure.
And actually the other one too, that's the same girl, just backwards, and I just did it twice. They're paintings.
No, I like it.
Yeah.
You know, for sure. So we've talked a lot about memory and passage of time, but I've spoke to you a little bit before about some of the ideas that your work embodies related to childhood and the perspective that you're trying to capture of being a child, or like childlike mentalities. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that.
As I've grown as an artist, I've also grown as a person. My situation has changed. I am a mother now. I have kids, and so even though I'm not specifically working with images of them, I'm listening to them and hearing the way their imaginations, take events. And it makes me think back to like, well, what might we have been thinking at that time? And so you can, you often parents, they get their, aunts and uncles, whatever, you have your kids together and it's bath time. So you throw the kids in the bathtub. And so I imagine being crowded in the bathtub with my cousins, which is what the photo is. And what you would be pretending you were on a boat, right? I mean, that just seemed to be, and then it becomes a painting, but it was sparked from a photograph of kids crowded in and just imagining where they would have been. And the other painting, Dreamer, it had been a group photo, and it was something about my cousin that in the way her eyes were closed, she just happened to be, everyone else was like smiling and whatever, and her just the shutter caught her, and her eyes were closed, and I just imagined her like dreaming and pretending. And I remember we would swim all the time and pretend we were mermaids, and so it's not obvious anymore. It was pretty obvious in the beginning, but so I just imagined her pretending,
Sure.
Yeah.
No, sure. Carrying through even further on that, I've noticed also a few of your newer drawings and paintings have drawings or visual elements that are trying to mimic the way a child would draw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is newer for me, definitely. And I was trying to push myself. I mean, every artist, presumably worries about becoming formulaic. You don't want to always do the same thing. And I work in multiples. I often do the same photograph multiple times in over a period of time. So I'm always looking for different ways to add to it. And again, as I now have my own children and I'm looking at the things they are creating, I was really struck by my daughter's drawings. And so Perfect Day was a painting I had started a while ago, and I was looking at this drawing that my daughter had made, and it was just, she called it A Sunny Day, and it was the drawing. And so I felt compelled to add that to my own painting. So I looked at hers and kind of copied it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that sparked to go on to Sister Whisker. It was another painting I had been working on and wasn't sure where to go forward. I had already been mosaicing or collaging the little Mylar bits and overlapping. And then had been looking at her drawings, but then also pulled out a folder of some things that I had done from when I was a kid, and then saw the way that I had done bunnies and cats, and then kind of copied that into the painting. Because I was just like, well, it's Easter and you're picturing, and kind of like, well, where would their imagination be taking them at that time? us, me and my sister at that time, I guess.
No, I really like it. I think it's just another, like you said, a step or a carry through of those concepts that you were exploring, like trying to think about how children see the world and kind of how more vibrant their imaginative capabilities are than a lot of adults.
Yeah, and and it was the other painting, Lurking, that was from like when my dad and his cousins were kids, and it was just them digging their legs over a pool, and it made me think about when I've done that, and you're always imagining what kind of monsters and things would be underneath. I mean, these are probably some of the more literal things I do, I guess, but I don't know. It was fun to make.
Kind of wonder what could be in the water underneath my feet.
Oh yeah.
So how did your daughter feel when you took that kind of first step and incorporated her drawing into your drawing?
Yeah. She's like, I don't remember putting that other girl in there. So she thought it was hers, and that I had like messed with her work.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
How has your work changed throughout your career?
So, as I said, I tend to be drawn to certain photographs. Though I have a ton that I haven't used yet, there are certain ones I will be drawn to again and again. And so there's Ann Easter. That was like the first one I did of that. And that was in 2006, kind of raw, everything. And then shortly thereafter, the second one, where I was started to mirroring the images to draw attention, trying to do that perspective to where what I was feeling,
Sure.
And then back to Sister Whisker. It's now 14 years later. I'm still drawn to that photo, but now actually I'm thinking more about the kids and how I think my painting style has gotten richer. I definitely am using a lot more color. It's all oil paint. People have sometimes asked me if it's watercolor or gouache, but it is oil paint. And I think slightly larger, and I'm not sure. I have another one too, a comparison. So I couldn't.
This is so cool. I didn't realize that you would, revisit the same sort of composition. It's literally a record, like, of how you kind of remix this idea over and over and over again.
Yeah, I wanted to bring in the first one too, but I had it on a slide. I couldn't find the digital image. The other one is in the collection at the Pennsylvania Academy, so I was able to go on their website and grab it. But these three were from 2006. It was one photograph done 3 times. An appearance of comprehension, that is 3 sheets of Mylar layered. I think the other ones are just one. So I do paint, like I said, on both sides. Okay. And then here is revisiting that photograph in 2 different versions for this show.
Yeah, I can definitely see what you mentioned about your work getting like kind of richer or more saturated. I definitely see more texture. Even in the last body of work of yours that I remember seeing, and then this one, I can kind of see that you've used kind of bolder colors, if that makes sense. There's a few of them, like there's one with a very vibrant, like kind of yellow orange color, and like it's good. It's a nice pop, but yeah.
So these colors are new to me. This boldness. Since working with the paintings. So my studio, I work mostly in the evenings, just when I'm able to. And I have a pretty good west shot through my window. And so I was catching the sunset a lot. You know, most of these were all from January until through August. And I caught a lot of sunsets. And the glow has been incredible. And I would just sit here mixing paint, trying to catch some of those colors. And that's where some of the vibrancy has come from.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I like it a lot. And I definitely get, having heard that, I get that kind of vibrant, because the figures and at least two of these are pretty dark too, which would make you think that, the sun is coming down.
Mm-hmm.
Having talked about all your work so far and how it's changed, what's next? What are you working on right now?
Yeah, so I feel as though this isn't complete. I feel like at this point, I showed everything I had done since January, so this year, so the past 8-9 months of work. And I am working on some new things now, and it's still kind of a continuation. Mm-hmm. I think other things along the terms of the work, I've tried. I often start paintings, like the drawings for them, mm-hmm. and then set them aside, and they pile up. Well, like a Mylar pile. So, this is a dozen paintings, right, that are started. And so I have a couple where I've taken childhood photo of myself, a young and then older me, and trying to put them together in the same frame.
Okay.
And it hasn't gotten too far yet. There something might happen. I don't know. My daughter talks quite frequently about the fact that she never met either of her grandfathers. Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to make a painting with her meeting them. So that might happen. But they had both died before she was born, and she was keenly aware of that. She feels really gypped to have not had any grandfathers. So, yeah. So
I never met my grandmother, and I feel kind of the same way. So I guess I can, because you see so many images in like the media of, like grandparents and showing the relationship with grandparents and grandchildren. I guess I could understand that.
Yeah. And the other thing that has been floating around in my mind, and I shared some of these with you. I had this idea of those drawings, the paintings where I was doing the childlike drawings, of escaping the object of the painting, whether it's onto the wall, or I tried doing them on these plexiglass pieces, so it would just be the graphite drawing on that to be hung. And I wanted that to be part of this show for Dear Memory. And the paintings kind of overtook kind of prominence in the work, and it wasn't fully realized, so they didn't end up getting shown. And I haven't abandoned them, so I don't know if I'll be able to do more with that going forward. So that's a possibility. Yeah. But then again, I make paintings, and I tend to do the same paintings over and over again to see how I can make them different. So there's also that.
Well, you've proven that you can make a painting look drastically different. So I think that there's, it's always good to have options and different ideas to just circulate back to.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Michele, for talking with me today. If you have not seen any of the exhibits up in Buckham Gallery right now for Dear Memory, I encourage you to take a trip there to see them. If you're not able to, we do have online viewing rooms of everything. And also, we have a couple different artist talks to look at. So if you are watching this, go watch the other artist talks too. Thank you, Michele.
Thank you, Janice. I appreciate it. This was great.
Yeah. It was fun.